The House Oversight Committee continues its inquiry into the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files. Wednesday night, fireworks at the committee briefing, the Democrats walking out after Attorney General Pam Bondi refused to commit to testify under oath despite being subpoenaed. Scripps News senior national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York now with the latest on this. And Alex, what exactly happened in the briefing, and will the AG be back on Capitol Hill next month?
Del, that is exactly the question many lawmakers are asking. The Attorney General is supposed to testify April 14th behind closed doors, sit for a deposition under oath, something that she would not commit to during Wednesday evening's briefing, part of what prompting Democrats to walk out of that hearing. We heard from them essentially saying that they had not been given any details about this briefing until shortly before showing up. It took place in the committee room, almost as if it was a regular hearing, a public hearing.
Hey everyone, your host Adam is here. So this is happening right now. Pam Bondi tried to pull a fast one. She gave the House Oversight Committee 24 hours notice for a briefing on the Epstein files. 24 hours, not a week, not a few days, 24 hours. And why the rush? Because she has a subpoena to appear under oath on April 14th.
On Capitol Hill, another showdown is brewing over the Jeffrey Epstein files. A House committee has ordered Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify under oath about the release of the documents that's linked to the convicted sex offender. Nicole Killian is covering all of this for us from Washington. Nicole, good morning to you. Good to see you. What can you tell us?
Hey, good morning to you, Gail. The Justice Department says this subpoena is completely unnecessary since the Attorney General is already planning to brief lawmakers later today on the Epstein matter. Still, the House Oversight Committee held a bipartisan vote this month to depose Pam Bondi under oath on April 14th. Lawmakers don't just want a private briefing, they want sworn testimony. Chair James Comer says the committee is investigating the possible mismanagement of the investigation into Epstein and co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. They also want to ensure the DOJ follows the law and releases all the documents.
A subpoena issued by the very same committee. And it became crystal clear the moment Democrats walked into that room that the whole thing was a setup, a scripted performance designed to give Bondi an escape hatch, a way for her to say, "See, I already told them everything. Why do I need to sit for a deposition under oath?" But Democrats saw it coming. They saw the trap being laid, and they did something you don't see every day in the halls of Congress. They stood up and walked out.
Listen to what the top Democrat on the committee had to say about that.
We're once again demanding that Attorney General Pam Bondi make it clear that she's going to come in for an under oath deposition, that she's under subpoena to do, and that we're not going to participate in fake hearings and briefings like the one that they tried to set up yesterday to get out of sworn under oath testimony that we are all demanding and that the American public continues to demand.
They refused to participate in what they called a sham hearing, a hearing with no oath, a hearing with no transcript, a hearing that was designed to do one thing and one thing only: give Bondi cover to dodge the real accountability waiting for her in just a few weeks. And here is where this story gets even more explosive. While all of this was unfolding, Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman walked onto the House floor with a document that the Trump Justice Department had redacted, a document they tried to bury, and he held it up for the world to see. Unredacted, in plain view. And what that document revealed was nothing short of a smoking gun. It showed Donald Trump's own lawyer, back in 2009, admitting something that Trump has been lying about for years. Epstein was never kicked out of Mar-a-Lago. Not a member, a guest, and he was never asked to leave. That is not speculation. That is not a rumor. That is the words of Trump's own attorney, written down, sent in an email, and now finally exposed after the DOJ tried to keep it hidden. So let me walk you through exactly what happened, how Bondi tried to orchestrate this escape, how Democrats called her bluff, and what that unredacted document actually says about the real relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. The timeline matters here. Just days ago, the House Oversight Committee, chaired by James Comer, sent a letter to Pam Bondi. It was a subpoena. It said she needed to appear on April 14th, under oath, in front of the committee. That letter alone was strange to anyone who has been paying attention. Comer is not exactly known for holding this administration accountable. He is a Trump loyalist through and through. So why was he suddenly demanding Bondi show up? It didn't add up, and now we know why. It was all part of a coordinated strategy. Comer sends the subpoena. Bondi gets to say she's complying. But then she immediately tries to replace the real deposition with a fake briefing. 24 hours before this briefing was called, Bondi's office announced she wanted to talk about the Epstein files. She wanted to come to Capitol Hill. She wanted to brief the committee. But here is what Democrats noticed immediately. This briefing was not under oath. It was not being transcribed. There would be no official record. There would be no perjury risk. It was, in every meaningful sense, a performance. And the moment they walked into that room, the performance began. Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia was there. He watched Bondi refuse to commit to showing up for her actual subpoenaed deposition. He asked her directly, multiple times, "Would you appear under oath on April 14th?" And she would not answer, would not commit, would not give a straight yes or no. That is when Garcia and the other Democrats on the committee made their decision. They stood up, they walked out, and Garcia posted exactly why moments later. "Oversight Democrats just walked out of an outrageous fake hearing," he wrote. Bondi refused to say she would show up for her under oath deposition. We asked her multiple times and she refused to commit. "We won't participate in a fake hearing that's not under oath and not transcribed. The American people deserve transparency and the truth. We are going to end this White House cover-up." Now, the Republican response was predictable. They put out a statement claiming Democrats never wanted answers, that they were planning to walk out all along, that Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche were answering substantive questions. But here is the problem with that defense. The GOP statement conveniently left out the part where Bondi refused to say she would follow the subpoena. They left out that she would not commit to showing up under oath. And they left out that Democrats had already seen this playbook before. Give a fake briefing, claim she already told them everything, then argue there is no need for the real deposition. It was a transparent attempt to short-circuit accountability, and Democrats refused to be props in their production. But the drama in the Oversight Committee room was only half the story. Because while Bondi was trying to dodge her deposition, Dan Goldman was on the House floor exposing what the Justice Department had been hiding. Let me tell you about this document. It is an email from October 2009. It contains notes from a conversation involving Jeffrey Epstein's attorney and Donald Trump's attorney. And here is the key part. The Trump administration redacted this document. They blacked out key details. They tried to make sure the public never saw what Trump's own lawyer actually said. But Goldman got the unredacted version, and he held it up on the House floor for everyone to see. What did it reveal? Let me give you the 3 things that matter most. Number 1. Trump's own lawyer admitted that Epstein was never kicked out of Mar-a-Lago, not a member. May have been a guest, was never asked to leave. Let that sink in. For years, Donald Trump has told a story about banning Epstein from Mar-a-Lago, about kicking him out, about cutting ties. But his own lawyer, in a document his own Justice Department tried to bury, says that never happened. The property manager, Bernd Lembecki, also confirmed Epstein was never asked to leave. The whole story was a fabrication. Number 2. The notes reference Trump being on Epstein's plane. That contradicts years of public denials from Trump about how limited his interactions with Epstein actually were. His own lawyer's notes say otherwise. Number 3. The document confirms that Trump had interactions connected to Epstein's world far beyond what he has ever admitted. The notes specifically mention Trump saying, "I may have been at Epstein's house with my wife." That is not the language of someone who had a casual acquaintance. That is the language of someone who had a relationship that required legal notes to be taken and memorialized. This is what the Trump Justice Department tried to hide. This is what they redacted. And this is what Goldman just made public on the House floor. Now let's go back to that sham hearing for a moment. Because what happened in that room was not just about procedure, it was about power. It was about whether an attorney general appointed by Donald Trump can be held accountable by the Congress that the Constitution says is a co-equal branch. And the behavior in that room told you everything about how this administration views oversight. At one point, Democratic Congresswoman Summer Lee was asking questions. She was pressing Bondi on whether she would show up for her deposition. She was making the point that this briefing was not a substitute for sworn testimony. And James Comer, the chairman, the man who sent the subpoena, told her to stop bitching. Those were his words, stop bitching. A sitting chairman of a congressional committee told a member to stop bitching for asking whether the attorney general would honor a subpoena. That is the level of contempt we are dealing with. Another Democrat, Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, described what it was like to be in that room. She talked about the shock of watching Bondi and Blanche sit there, knowing exactly what they were trying to do. She talked about how obvious it was that this whole thing was scripted, and she talked about why Democrats walked out, because staying in that room, she said, made you a co-conspirator to a cover-up. Those were strong words. But they were not hyperbole. When an attorney general tries to replace a sworn deposition with an off-the-record briefing with no transcript and no oath, and when a chairman tells members to stop bitching for asking about it, you are witnessing an active effort to obstruct accountability. Let me also tell you about what happened in the hallways. Our team caught up with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she made a point that cuts to the heart of why all of this matters. She talked about Donald Trump being compromised by the Epstein files. That is not a phrase she uses lightly. She was saying that the reason Trump has been so desperate to keep these documents hidden, the reason Bondi is trying to dodge a deposition, the reason the DOJ redacted that email, is because the truth about Trump's relationship with Epstein is something that he cannot afford to have the American people see clearly. Because once they see it, once they understand the extent of the connections, once they read his own lawyer's words admitting that the Mar-a-Lago story was a lie, the political calculation changes. Congressman Maxwell Frost put it bluntly. He said this was all a cover-up, a White House cover-up, and he said Democrats are not going to sit there and pretend otherwise. When Bondi called that briefing, when she refused to commit to her deposition, when Comer started shouting at members for asking basic questions, Frost said they had no choice but to walk out. Because participating in a fake hearing, a hearing designed to give Bondi an excuse to skip the real one, would have been endorsing the cover-up. Congressman Suhas Subramaniam told our team that the entire episode was an insult to the American people. An attorney general should not be trying to escape accountability. She should not be giving 24 hours notice for a briefing that has no legal weight and then refusing to say whether she will honor her subpoena. He said Democrats walked out because they refused to be part of a charade. And here is the bottom line on all of this. Bondi tried to pull a fast one. She thought she could give a quick briefing, claim she had provided all the information, and then argue that the deposition was unnecessary. She thought James Comer would play his part, which he did, complete with the shouting and the name-calling. She thought the whole thing would be wrapped up in a day and she could move on. But Democrats did not play along. They saw what was happening. They called it what it was, a sham, a fake hearing, a cover-up, and they walked out. They walked out because staying in that room would have lent legitimacy to something that had none. And while Bondi was sitting in that room, refusing to commit to her deposition, Dan Goldman was on the House floor exposing the documents she and her department tried to hide. That unredacted email is now public. It is out there. And it says, in the words of Donald Trump's own lawyer, that Epstein was never kicked out of Mar-a-Lago. That the story Trump has told for years is a lie. That the redactions the Trump DOJ placed on that document were a deliberate attempt to hide the truth from the American people. This is not over. Bondi still has a subpoena. She still has to appear on April 14th. And now, after this stunt, after this sham briefing, after watching Democrats walk out of a hearing she tried to use as an escape hatch, the pressure on her to show up and answer questions under oath is greater than ever. Because if she tries to dodge it now, if she tries to use this briefing as an excuse, she will have to explain why she gave a performance with no oath and no transcript instead of doing what the law requires. And the document Goldman revealed changes everything. It is no longer about speculation. It is no longer about rumors. It is Trump's own lawyer, on the record, debunking 2 lies Trump has told about his relationship with Epstein. That is not hearsay. That is not anonymous sources. That is paper. That is ink. That is a smoking gun that the Justice Department tried to redact and that Congress just made public. Stay tuned. The deposition is still on the calendar. The document is out there, and we are going to be right here covering every single development as it unfolds. Does Bondi show up for that deposition on April 14th, or does she try another stunt to avoid answering questions under oath? I want to hear from you.